Please tell me that I can't, that I won't, that I fail, that I'll never make it out, yeah. Please tell me all the bad, never good.
All right, everybody, welcome back to That Effin' Sports Show. We are glad you could come back and share some time with us. We're going to be talking fantasy football today. Everybody's drafting right now. Everybody's either in slow drafts or you've done a couple short drafts, and so you kind of have an idea. We've done tons of mock drafts, and of course, once you get in a real draft, it never goes that way. But since we're going to talk about fantasy football and talk about fantasy drafting, we got to bring in the guy who writes about this stuff all year long, and that's Adam Hulse over at Adam Hulse Sports on Twitter, NFL writer at Sportskita. Adam, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us every week like you do. Let's talk some fantasy and fantasy drafting this week.
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right. It's definitely draft season right now. I personally have multiple slow drafts going on at the same time right now.
Yeah.
I love the point you made about, the mock drafting and then the actual draft day, because isn't it like that every year with every draft? You prepare, you do your mock drafts with your position, you go in with this clear plan of what you think's going to happen, and then the picks start happening completely different than you would have thought they would have went, and your team looks so different than you thought it would. That's why we have to remain flexible on draft day, right? You can't get too locked into one strategy or one guy or anything like that. You have to be able to adjust on the fly depending who's available and what the other guys are doing.
There are a lot of strategies going down. Number one, we talk about mock drafting. Are you a big fan of mock drafting?
I like mock drafting. I definitely try to do at least a couple, especially if I know my draft position pre-draft. I like to do a couple more just to kind of get an idea of, round by round who could be available. But as we kind of both pointed out with these mock drafts, the best way really to do mock drafts is with other live mock drafters. When you're just doing like the computer simulated ones, they tend to be less accurate. If you can be mock drafting, even if it's not all 12 teams with an actual user, if you can get 6 or so real people in there, the more real users, the more accurate it is.
My problem with the mock drafts is, number one, people don't stick around, and I'm not sure that people try to necessarily be accurate. I know that there's a lot of people that are in the room that are trying to gauge a picture and do an accurate draft so they can be better prepared. But I always feel like there's those one or two guys who are just trying to throw everybody off.
You're definitely right about that. And then half the time people make their first 1 or 2 picks, and then you're right, they just leave the room anyway, or they make, a stupid, silly pick to try to be funny and then just log out. You're right, that does happen a lot. Look, mock drafting to me is just one of many tools to prepare for a draft. I think everyone should be mock drafting a little bit. You need to be, out there reading some fantasy articles, getting fantasy rankings. Don't get locked into one person's rankings and one person's perspective either, right? Get a little bit from different angles. Don't be stubborn, get a lot of opinions. But then when it really comes down to it, take all of that knowledge that you kind of got from everybody else and make your own. That's always my suggestion to people is don't get so obsessed with consensus and what the quote unquote experts are saying. And, because experts, what does that even really mean? Take their advice and then form your own opinion and do it that way. Don't just take a guy because you're like, well, this guy said that I should take him before him. Okay, but not everybody feels that way.
We brought up this stat before, and I bring it up all year long. I've been bringing it up since last year when I broke it out, that the consensus number one pick for 11 years running now has never finished at number one. There was a standard scoring instance where Todd Gurley did it in 2016, but asterisk, I call it an asterisk because it was standard scoring, but the consensus overall pick has never finished as the number one. And actually 43% of the time they finish outside the top 10. That consensus number one pick, you got to be careful with that. Look at the consensus number one pick. So first of all, is your consensus number one pick Justin Jefferson? Is it CMC or is it Austin Eckler, which seemed to be the big three this year? Usually it seems like we have one. Last year it was definitely JT. I told everybody don't draft JT, and I was right. I'm not saying, look at me, I was right. I'm saying stats don't lie. Consensus number one didn't finish in the top 10. This year it seems like it's a little more up in the air.
Yeah, and going along with kind of that stat that you just threw out is, like whoever finished number one overall the last season is often the number one overall pick the next year, right? That's kind of like the trends that it goes in. But the stats work against that trend in that, kind of like you pointed out, nobody ever finishes number one twice in a row. Like, it doesn't happen. The whole JT thing, like you brought up, you often want to take the guy who was the best last year with your top pick, but there's so much fantasy data now, and all of it says target somebody else. Of course, target somebody good, like towards the top, but there's almost a 100% chance that somebody else is going to be the top performer this year. So go somewhere else.
And we're talking about overall fantasy here too. We're not suggesting that Patrick Mahomes isn't going to be the number one quarterback. Mm-hmm. We're talking about the fantasy, like with that number one pick, don't target the guy who finished number one, which would be Eckler. Well, it depends on it depends on what stat you're looking at, right? So Josh Jacobs had the most rushing yards. Austin Eckler had the most fantasy yards in PPR. CMC had the most fantasy points in standard. That's why I say it's a little more difficult this year. I think you make a great point. It's because we have all these stats now. It was just a clear cut, this guy finished number one. You have different categories that people were number one, and so that kind of alters things a bit when you're looking at it.
So like this emergence of like the advanced analytics, like people really breaking down like these advanced percentages and advanced metrics, how many points they scored versus how many points they were expected to score, based on, their route percentage and all this other crazy stuff. Like you could spend hours and hours going into, the details of advanced metrics.
Yards after the catch, air yards, yards before contact, yards after contact, how many tackles broken. Yeah, I've looked at them all. I love them.
Right. Yeah. Like I love them too, but like sometimes we can get too hung up on that, right? Like you could say, Absolutely. Look, like all the advanced statistics say that this guy had a great year. But then, the contrarian to that is like, okay, well then why didn't he have more yards, receptions, and touchdowns? And people say, oh, well, he was unlucky. Sure, like unlucky can happen. And again, I'm an advanced stats guy as well, like I love all of that stuff. But really it comes down to, did you perform or didn't you? You were saying about the consensus number one overall this year and how there's like a couple different areas people are going. To me, the most I've seen is actually Justin Jefferson. He seems to be going number one overall in most drafts, especially when you're going PPR. But like everybody goes PPR now, right? Like there's very few leagues anymore that don't have PPR. Like standard scoring is almost extinct at this point. Like nobody's using really standard
scoring. I think standard scoring is great if you're just getting into it. But I think once you've been playing, I do think most people prefer a PPR or at least a half.
Yeah, PPR or at least a half. Yeah, like I'm fine with half PPR as well. I actually kind of like half PPR, but again, like I said, it seems like pretty much everywhere now is going to be PPR for the most part. Just to clarify one thing we were saying about, not targeting like the top guy from the year before, like there's of course an asterisk with that as well, right? Like if you
exceptions
have
to every rule.
Yeah, like if you have the number 5 pick and Christian McCaffrey is sitting there, of course that's a good pick. Like we're just saying that like the chances of him actually finishing as the number one player, history says that's probably not going to happen, but that doesn't mean he's not still going to be a fantasy stud.
No, and that's the thing. I said 43% of the time they finish outside of look. That's still overwhelming. 67% of the time they still finish in the top 10. They don't finish at number one. And that doesn't mean you don't take them. I didn't tell anybody not to take Jonathan Taylor last year. I didn't tell people not to take him first. If you want to take him first, take him first. What I said is don't expect him to finish first. The history doesn't support that. Boy, did I get blown up when I loved it. I loved making the argument. I loved throwing the numbers out there. I love that people took an interest in making when I made that observation, put that out there, but the numbers don't lie. And like you said, you've got number one pick. No one's going to get mad at you for taking Justin Jefferson or CMC or Eckler. Take either one and you're going to be fine. Just don't expect them to finish as the top guy because one of those guys, they all can't. When you're talking about CMC and Eckler, they both can't finish as number one unless you want to split the scoring like they did last year, standard versus PPR. So I guess there's an argument there. But because of the stats, because of the history, they probably won't be at the top this year. It'll be interesting to see who is. Back to the zero RB strategy, because I do want to talk about that. It's a big thing now. It's growing immensely in popularity. People were talking about it last year. Now people are like obsessed with it this year. They are loving the zero RB strategy. It's very hard for me to do when I have a CMC, a Barkley, Eckler, even a Pollard sitting there on the board in the first round to grab someone like, I don't know, Jefferson's already gone. So after that, I feel like that next tier after Jefferson, it has quite a few people in it, whereas the tier of running backs doesn't. Zero RB is hard for me.
The trend of it going that way, especially this year, is because there are so many receivers right now who are capable of putting up monster scores on a weekly basis, while there's less running backs, I would say, that are capable of doing so. With most teams now are using multiple running backs in their scheme. You know, like the workhorse back just, continues to decline. This kind of circles back to what I was saying early in the show about being flexible on draft day, right? Like you might have the mindset of going into this draft, like I'm going to go zero RB here. I'm going to use this zero RB strategy. Then it gets to you, and let's say you're like the 8th pick. Jefferson went already. Chase went already. Tyreek Hill went already. And you're sitting there at 8th pick and Christian McCaffrey's there. Don't be stubborn and say, well, I can't take McCaffrey because I'm going zero RB. If you see that everybody else is going wide receiver, maybe you then want to pivot, like you have to look at value. And look, like I can give a perfect example of this, of something me and you actually talked about recently, of a slow draft I was doing that was a super flex. My plan was definitely to go quarterback in the first round, but because of where I sat and because of the way the picks fell, I actually ended up going McCaffrey later in the first round because he was there, and I just felt like that pick made more sense. So it wasn't quarterback or nothing. It was, I plan on taking a quarterback, but I always have to see what happens.
I've seen that in quite a few drafts. Super flex, when everybody's taking quarterbacks,
that's the other growing thing, right?
There is one guy that ends up taking like 3 running backs in a row.
Yep.
They don't end up so bad at the end.
No, and then you end up getting sometimes decent quarterbacks. Your mid to high quarterbacks like Daniel Jones and guys like that who have a lot of upside that you can get in like the 4th, 5th, 6th round, as opposed to using both of your 2 picks. But, Superflex, you said zero RB is becoming more and more popular, which it is. Superflex seems to be taking over the fantasy world now also. To me, like, what's so funny about Superflex, though, is like, why do we still call it Superflex? It's 2 QB. Nobody starts not a QB in their Superflex spot.
It's kind of true, right?
Why don't we just transition to 2 QB leagues instead of still calling Superflex, that you could start any position you want here? Everyone starts a QB there. Just make it a 2 QB league.
Do you find yourself trying to grab the same players in different leagues? Do you get stuck? I know you're not supposed to, but
yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Like, I do gravitate towards certain players. Like, we all have our guys. We all have guys that we love and guys that we target. But to me, like, having the our guys is most important in the mid to late rounds. Guys that you've, like, targeted that, like, you feel good about their upside versus their ADP late in the draft. I think it's most important to kind of spread out your distribution in the earlier rounds, like don't put all of your eggs into Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley or whoever it is that you're targeting in that 1st, 2nd round range. I think you should get a good mix on your different teams of those guys. And I don't think you should go all in on one guy because we know how detrimental it is to a team. God forbid your 1st round pick goes down with an injury early in the season. It can completely derail your fantasy season altogether. And if you have that guy on like all of your teams, now all of your teams are screwed. So let's spread it out a little bit, give yourself some insurance. While those late picks in the round, if you have guys you like, I think you can have them on as many teams as you want because those are your high upside guys that you're hoping work out. If they don't, you can just replace them with someone on the waiver wire. Just like if they get injured, it's not going to destroy your team. It's just going to take away one of the guys you're hoping works out.
We talk about the super flex part. Number one, I'm watching bye weeks, not necessarily in this order, but I'm watching bye weeks to make sure I don't have too many people off in the same week. Number two, I'm trying to get number ones, wide receiver ones, RB ones, stuff like that, especially in the later rounds when you're kind of picking up the scraps. There's still a lot of ones out there. That's a nice spot to grab a Nico Collins, who we're not sure is going to be number one, but right now is probably number one. There's quality number twos down there as well. And so you got to kind of watch that. I'm trying to load up on number ones, especially at the beginning of the draft. I see a lot of twos go off the board. Like I see Devonta Smith going a lot. I see Christian Kirk going a lot early. I don't have a problem with it. I expect them to perform, but I'd rather have a number one in most cases. I'm looking for stacks. After we went through every team. We went through the entire schedule. We predicted how every team was going to finish up at the end of the year. So you can go back, find every single team throughout this podcast. You can find your favorite team. You can find any team you want and see how they're going to finish this year. But you got me really high on Trevor Lawrence. He plays in a crappy division. His division plays against another crappy division all year. And so there's a lot of games that play in his favor. So I've really been going after and targeting Trevor Lawrence, gravitating towards Trevor Lawrence. And in that gravitation, I've also been gravitating towards Ridley. Now, I like Ridley. I think Ridley's going to pay off. I think Ridley has a history to pay off. Arguing the other side of it, he hasn't played in a while. He doesn't like people talking about the rust, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And it is a risk to take a guy who hasn't played in a year, but I'm still doing it. And I think those stacks, those gravitational pulls from other leagues definitely have influenced the drafts I've done so far.
Yeah, there's a lot of data that supports stacking a quarterback and a wide receiver, right? There's a lot of data out there that shows how beneficial it is to at least whoever your quarterback is to have at least one of their wide receivers, preferably their top wide receivers. And it's interesting that you mentioned Ridley. If you listen to any episode of this show, everybody knows how much I love Trevor Lawrence. I do love Calvin Ridley as well as that new pairing. You bring up some valid points, but also I just want to point out that it seems like everybody loves Calvin Ridley right now. Like my feeling around most of the drafts that I've done, Calvin Ridley is going even earlier than I thought that he would have. Like people are reaching right now for Ridley. So there is like a common thought out there that he's going to be, you know, a massive star with Trevor Lawrence. You know, he's going to rise right up there with him. And I mean, as you mentioned too, he does have great data with the Falcons. This guy was a wide receiver one before everything happened. Without a doubt, he was easily a wide receiver one. Now he's in a loaded offense with a superstar quarterback on the rise. So, like, it makes sense why everybody likes him, but he's trending up. If you want Calvin Ridley in drafts, you're going to have to take him pretty early.
Current ADP, they've got him at wide receiver, roughly around wide receiver 17.
And he's going before that.
Yeah, like I promise you he's not going to last
before that. He's not going to last the wide receiver 17 anymore.
No, I see him going. I've seen him go before Waddle. I've seen him go before Higgins, who has a higher ADP, definitely before Metcalf. Let's talk about the Seattle offense. The Seattle receivers, I see them just going way, way late, and I have no problem not buying stock in any Seattle wide receiver. Love Geno Smith because he has all these wide receivers. Definitely grabbed Geno a couple times, especially in Superflex leagues. The wide receiver core, I am not grabbing any piece of because I see him kind of like the Chargers receiving core, as in there's so much talent and so many mouths to feed that I don't think any of these guys are going to have like super huge numbers. They're going to have super huge weeks. Great for best ball. I like these guys in best ball. I don't want them on my redraft team.
They're tricky, right? Because especially, you know, you mentioned the Chargers and the Seahawks as those two, you know, situations with good receivers that are all kind of going later. And sure, there's some value there. But also both of those teams just used a first-round draft pick on a wide receiver. They were already good last year, and they're even better, which is great for them from like a real NFL perspective. But from fantasy, it makes a lot of question marks of who's going to be the guys getting the targets. It's very, very hard to support three wide receivers in fantasy football. You know, it's usually only two on a good offense that are going to be relevant. And there might be a third good receiver from an NFL perspective, but from fantasy, it's usually two. So which of these two of the three are going to be the two? Like there's most likely one of those three is going to end up being a bust this year from a fantasy perspective, maybe not from a real football perspective. And until we see these rookies play, Quentin Johnston and JSN, we don't exactly know what that's going to look like.
So true. Even more so when we talk about these quarterbacks, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Richardson. I'm seeing Richardson come off the board a lot sooner than I'm seeing even Bryce go off the board. Are you seeing that too?
Way sooner.
Yeah.
Way sooner. Like Richardson easily by far is the first rookie quarterback going off of draft boards. He's been all over the place in the drafts that I've seen, the mocks I've done, in the real drafts I've done. Some people are targeting him super early, especially in like a super flex situation. I've seen him go as early as the second round in super flex drafts. Wow. People really want him as their QB2 because they get excited about that upside of the rushing, especially in a best ball type format, right? That's where people are really getting excited about Richardson, is in 2 QB and best ball, because we know how valuable rushing upside is for quarterbacks in fantasy football. he obviously has that. That's kind of as high as I've seen him gone, but I've seen him available in the middle rounds in some drafts too. Like, I guess it kind of depends who you're drafting with, like the spectrum, because it seems to me like Richardson has a very high ceiling in fantasy because of his rushing, but he also has a very low floor. There is a wide range of outcomes that I can see for Anthony Richardson in fantasy this year, and I think that's why he's being drafted all over the place.
I mean, he's got a decent schedule to test out the skills, and we went over that whole thing. Every team we went over through the whole schedule gave you a record at the end. And I don't think we over-exaggerated that one. We did agree he's going to have some room to work. And he's got some tough games. He's got AFC North he's got to deal with, but he's also got the NFC South, not to mention his own division in the AFC South. So he's got, the two worst divisions of football to kind of explore and break his way into the NFL and figure out what he can and can't do. Superflex. Who is your third quarterback? If you play Superflex, you have to take a third quarterback at some point because you got bye weeks to cover. Maybe you're thinking about injuries, and sometimes there's just good talent out there. Who is your QB3 for Superflex?
I think you're going to like this one, but the guy I'm targeting a lot as my QB3 is Kenny Pickett. I see a lot of upside for Kenny Pickett this year. I've seen him as a QB2 on some Superflex teams as well. There are some people out there who are overdrafting Kenny Pickett as well because they believe in his upward trajectory. If I can get Kenny Pickett later in a draft as my QB3 in a Superflex league, I'm all about it.
Yep. For mine, I'm going to go somewhere that I know you're not really going to like as much. Jared Goff is someone I like. I think he's got a nice ceiling. I'm not saying he's going to win a lot of games. I'm just saying he's going to get you a lot of points. Goff is my 2023 Romo.
I like that.
Yeah, he used to be a fantasy monster. Didn't matter what the record was, but man, you got fantasy points galore off Romo. That's where I see Goff.
As the same team, though, I'm kind of curious, too. Who is your favorite QB2 right now? Like, let's go up one more QB because, there's a lot of options at that QB2 spot also. Who are you targeting for QB2?
I mean, QB2 is interesting because it depends on where you draft, of course, who's already taken, things like that. I suppose Geno Smith would probably fall in that category for me. I actually did take him as a QB2 from the 11th spot in a 12-team draft. Again, he has so much firepower around him. He's got so many weapons. Even his backs are receiving backs. Carroll loves to throw the ball. He loves to take advantage of it. My problem with Geno Smith is the division he plays in. He has tough defenses, but that means he might be playing from behind, means that he's going to have to play the whole game. And so I do like Geno Smith. Geno or Kirk? I like Kirk as the QB2 also. He's got Jefferson. He puts up big numbers. Had a little too many interceptions last year, but if he can knock some of those down, they have a crappy defense. They have to play all game as well. And so I like Kirk or Geno for my QB2. What's yours?
You might be a little bit surprised on who I've often targeted as my QB2 because I don't think this team is really all that good. And I've often called this team a fluke on several episodes that we've done together.
Really? This is where you're going. I like it.
Love Daniel Jones as my QB2.
I would have put him in the 3, but I see where you're going with it.
No, for me, he's a QB2. He finished in the top 10 last year, which is crazy. Daniel Jones was a top 10 quarterback last year, and you can have him at a very respectable price this year in most drafts. He rushed for over 700 yards last year and 7 touchdowns, which is crazy. The fact that I don't believe in the Giants this year at all, kind of like you mentioned with Geno and playing good defenses and from behind possibly, I think the Giants are going to be behind in games a lot this year.
Oh, they've got one of the toughest strength of schedules in the NFL if you believe in those.
Right. And that obviously doesn't, for me, just help Daniel Jones' passing, but his rushing as well. He's going to be dropping back to throw a lot, and he's going to be able to take off and run a lot. I don't think last year's rushing was a fluke. I think the Giants were a fluke. I've said that often. But with Daboll and that offense he ran with Josh Allen was obviously a run-heavy quarterback type of offense. He used that same thing last year with Jones, and it worked. Jones did it well, so I expect that to continue. And the fact that I think that they're going to be behind a lot, I think helps his case. And obviously them adding Darren Waller, as long as Waller can stay healthy, that's going to help his passing as well. Easy completion.
And they got Hyatt in as the new rookie. They're going to want to test him out. The fluke part of it was the wins, not the stats. So the stats could still hold up. The stats could very easily repeat. Same coach, similar team setup.
This is one of those things I talk about too with real NFL versus fantasy. I don't like Daniel Jones at all as a real NFL quarterback. I absolutely love him as a fantasy quarterback. And it's that rushing upside that we talked about, like if I was a Giants fan, I wouldn't be happy that Daniel Jones just got the contract that he got. He's not the guy I'd want to have my faith in for the next few years or so. But from a fantasy perspective, give me Danny Jones all day.
I'm going to throw in one more. This might be the QB4, but he's the one guy that I did wait on really late. And you can wait on Daniel Jones, like you said, good value there. You can go ahead and keep getting your running backs and your wide receivers in a super flex league while everybody else is grabbing, their quarterbacks. You can grab yourself some quality talent and sleep on Daniel Jones for a bit. If you're going to go 4 or if you're in need of a 3 or something like that, I think kind of a sleeper pick for me is Brock Purdy. And I know I've kind of been down on Brock. Is he going to last? But he's going to be healthy. He's going to be in there. Great talent, great coaching staff. This is a team that likes to run it up. Even his backs are pass catching guys. I think Brock Purdy and Brock Purdy didn't blow the stats away. Look, he won. He got a couple touchdowns per game, kept his interceptions low. If he can get a couple touchdowns a game, keep his interceptions low, hopefully playing a full season this year, I think he's somebody that you could throw in there. I think he's a great best ball guy, but I think he's somebody in that super flex format that could be a good fit and a nice fill in on your league. And maybe he does even better than we thought. And so you just got yourself a really good find.
See, I like that call with Brock Purdy. It's a risky play. And like you said, it's more of like a QB4 late round upside type of target situation because Purdy couldn't have much of a better supporting cast around him, coaching staff. And just the way Shanahan designs that offense is so beneficial for the quarterback. And I think Brock Purdy, he's basically like, the point guard, right? For Deebo Samuel, for Brandon Ayuk, for George Kittle, for Christian McCaffrey. Purdy isn't asked to do a whole lot. He just gets the ball in the hands of his playmakers and lets them go to work. And the 49ers have specifically drafted for that style of offense, right? They've gotten all these yak guys, these guys that are awesome at catching the ball and making a play after they catch it, quick slants, bubble screens. They have some of the best guys in the NFL at running those types of plays, which is super beneficial for Brock Purdy. If I'm going to go in that QB4 range, like in that same type of Brock Purdy, a guy that I think maybe could have some upside is a very late round sleeper QB4 type of situation. I'd actually go with Desmond Ridder. I'm curious.
He's my other one.
Nobody's challenging Desmond Ridder's job this year. They're going to let him play the full season and really see what they have before they analyze again next year, right? The addition of Bijan Robinson is obviously huge. That should open some things up for him. Also, Bijan, great pass catcher out of the backfield as well, right? You could do a lot worse than Desmond Ridder as your QB4, and I think he has more upside than most in that spot.
Absolutely. You talk about those yards after contact, those yak guys. Deebo Samuel, number 9 for yak yards, right there in the top 10, and he's only going to get more opportunity this year. Brandon Ayuk looks like right about 15. Both those guys, same team in the top 15 on the yards after contact.
Yeah, not even to mention Kittle and McCaffrey, right?
Yep, absolutely. We can sit here and talk fantasy football all day, and we're going to keep talking it all season. Make sure you come back next week. Next week, drafts are done. National Draft Day will have happened. Most of your drafts will be done. People like myself will still have a few to go because we just can't get enough. We like to torture ourselves with having too many fantasy teams. We need to talk lineups. Week 1 will be right around the corner next week. We'll probably have less than a week to go before game 1. So next week, tune in as Adam and I break down some of the guys that you drafted that you just need to play, and other guys, they might want to ride the bench for week 1 just to see how it turns out. We're going to go over all that stuff with you. Adam Hulse will be here, NFL writer at Sportskeeda, right here on That Effin' Show. EFIN is the keyword. If you're looking for the podcast, looking for the YouTube channel, want to find us on Twitter, it's That Effin' Show, EFIN Show. Join us next week as we keep the fantasy train rolling all season long. You guys are playing, we're playing. Adam, I'm excited for fantasy season. I know you're ready to go.
All fantasy season's in full swing right now. This is draft season. If you're not drafting right now, what are you waiting for, right? Let's get it going. And I love the point you made about, never being able to get enough. It feels like every year I say I'm going to reduce how many fantasy leagues that I do. But then draft season comes around and I'm like, I want to draft. Let me get in all these drafts. And then by mid-season, I'm like, geez, man, why did I do so many leagues this year? I really got to reduce it next year. And then the cycle just goes on and on.
Yeah, from 3 to 6 to somewhere around 14, 15 right now. You guys take care. Have fun drafting, and we'll talk about where to play them next week on That Effin' Sports Sports Show for Adam Hulse, I'm Chris Fox. We will see you guys next week. Take care, everybody.